Hello there. Thank you for joining us. What I'd like to talk about today is a series by Express Publishing called Career Paths. Some of you may be already familiar with it. If you're not familiar with it, it's a series that we have developed looking at teaching English for specific purposes. And what I'd like to do in this short presentation is just tell you a little bit about Career Paths, what it's designed for, and how it might be of use to you in the classroom. The first thing to remember about English for specific purposes is that it breaks down into several different categories. For example, you have English for academic purposes, EAP. There's also something called English for restricted purposes that I came across, which is English for use in occupations where people have to use very limited English. What we are interested in Career Paths is the branch of English for specific purposes called English for business purposes, English for professional purposes, and English for occupational or vocational purposes. In other words, it's English for people who are looking to use English in their professional daily lives. And the series was designed very much with that in mind. So as well as making choices about the language that we have to teach our learners, what we also have to do is look at the skills that they will need to develop in English. For example, if I were teaching learners who are going on to be tour guides, what I would have to do there is focus on the language skills, especially of speaking and to a certain extent listening. It is arguable that reading and writing are actually less important. If I'm teaching a business person English, I'm going to be teaching them basically all the four skills, because business people are going to have to read, write, listen and speak on a number of different occasions. If I'm teaching someone involved in information technology, it may be that most of their communication is online and may take the form of simple conversations via Skype, or it may be that they have to write short emails to colleagues. On the other hand, the information that they have to read in terms of technical information, manuals, so on and so forth, is highly detailed. And so I would possibly want to concentrate more on developing their reading skills in those particular areas. So what we did when we were putting Career Paths together is we relied on the help of experts to help us look at the areas that learners would be using language in, and of course the kinds of things that they would have to come across, the skills that they would have to use. We spent a long time researching these and taking advice. And then as we put the series together, we focus each lesson on a particular aspect of that particular profession and the language use involved. So for example, we introduce reading texts that learners are likely to come across. We look at vocabulary and isolate structures, expressions, etc. that learners are likely to need in their profession. And very, very importantly, we also have interactive, communicative activities with which the learners are likely to be involved in terms of speaking activities, where appropriate of course, and their writing as well. One of the other considerations we had to make when creating the Career Path series is that English for specific purposes these days is taught in a number of different environments. Certainly in the past, a lot of English for specific purposes was taught to business professionals, to people who maybe travelled internationally or who had contact with fellow professionals, either coming to visit them or via correspondence. These days our experience is that a lot of English for vocational and occupational purposes is being taught in vocational institutions, technical colleges, so on and so forth. And certainly our own experience and the feedback that we get from colleagues is that the level of English that such students have is not necessarily always that good. Certainly there will always be students whose level of English is excellent, but we also have to provide for cases where the level of English is less than one would hope for. So what we did in the Career Path series was to make sure that the series is kind of graded in terms of its level. So the series starts at A2 level and moves upwards, getting into the kind of B1, B2 areas. So when you start the series, learners don't have to be at B2 level, although certainly they have to have a basis in English. As you can see from some of the texts that I have put on the screen, we have managed to simplify some of the reading texts so that our learners are not overly intimidated by, for example, reading comprehension activities that are designed to teach them language use. As an example of what I'm talking about, please have a look at this text that I took from Wikipedia that regards soil erosion. Within the text, you can see a number of words are highlighted in red. These words are the subject-specific vocabulary that learners will be expected to remember, to learn, and to use. Of course, these words are surrounded by a larger text, which is in white. Part of the problem here may well be that my learners would be overly intimidated by a text of this length, so many new expressions and words surrounding it in the kind of carrier text that is far too complex for them. So what we've done in Career Paths is to take subject-specific vocabulary, and you will see on your screen now an example of a similar text from Career Paths, but A, we don't introduce so many expressions all at the same time, and B, if you look closely, you will see that the text surrounding the new vocabulary is of a level that my learners should be able to comprehend a lot more easily and hopefully with a lot more ease and not feel quite so intimidated. In speaking activities as well, we've made every effort to make sure that the activities we ask our learners to perform are within their level of English competence. So if you have a look at this particular example of a speaking activity, you will see it requires fairly low-level English skills. Although at the same time, this particular speaking activity is directly related to the learner's work and the world of their work, and would be instantly usable the minute they left the classroom. So we try and strike it in Career Paths a very clear balance between the level of our learners and at the same time making sure that we target language use that they can use. We hope in this way that we can keep learners' motivation high and keep them engaged and involved in the classroom. At this point I should mention that Career Paths as a course doesn't teach, for example, grammar explicitly, and it's important that you know that. We decided that this course should not just be another general English textbook. So Career Paths, although it teaches a huge amount of vocabulary and expressions and it gives the experience I've just been talking to you about, doesn't actually function as a grammar book. If you find that your learners need to brush up their general English skills, please consider using concurrently with Career Paths one of our other books, for example Upload, which is the course for teenagers. It may be useful to kind of work on the two together to brush up their general language skills at the same time as working on their subject-specific language skills. If you have any questions about, for example, a course book you may wish to accompany Career Paths with, please contact our colleagues at Prosvещение and they will be able to advise you further on the kind of thing you might want to use there. Now, what I would like to do to finish off with is just to take you through a sample from a unit in Career Paths, just for you to have a look at the kind of thing we ask our learners to do. Each lesson in Career Paths deals with a specific theme. In the example we're looking at words to do with facilities that one may find in a hotel. Here is an overview of the double spread that is essentially the lesson. At the start of this lesson, and the start of all lessons, learners are encouraged to bring their own knowledge to bear. We ask them very simply what kind of amenities they might expect to find in a hotel. This activates their previous knowledge of the concept and any vocabulary they may already know. They then go on to read a text which talks about the kind of amenities you might find in a hotel. This text is also recorded to give learners a chance to hear the new vocabulary and pick up its pronunciation. As we move towards the end of the lesson, we start to focus on the more communicative aspects of the language. So our learners listen to a conversation that includes many of the terms that they have learned in today's lesson. This listening activity provides the model for the learner's speaking activity. Following on from that is the writing activity. The writing activity will never be write a composition about a particular subject. Writing activities are always pieces of writing that my learners would legitimately be called on to do in the course of their particular profession. What I've hoped to demonstrate to you today in this short presentation is that Career Paths is deliberately targeted towards language that learners will use in their chosen profession. If you think it will be of use to you, please do check the Prosvещение or Express Publishing websites, where you will see the titles currently available, and I assure you there are very many. If you would like to speak to anybody or discuss this issue further, please contact Prosvещение at the contact details you'll see at the end of this presentation. Thank you very much for joining us today, and we hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.